This video will provide a summary of one of the most important battles in the 20th century, and it will also outline a pivotal moment in the foundation of the People's Republic of China. The Chinese Communist Party was established around the time the centuries-old Qing dynasty fell in 1912, and the Republic of China, or the Nationalists, took control. The Nationalists cracked down on communism, with Chiang Kai-shek describing them as a disease of the heart. The Communists and Nationalists united in 1937 to face the threat from Imperial Japan. As the war came to a close, the conflict between the Communists and the Nationalists re-intensified. In August 1945, the Nationalists had the upper hand. They had 4.4 million regulars, while the Communists had just 1.2 million. The Communists launched the doctrine of March of the North, defending the South. The plan was to capture the North as the Japanese retreated with the help of the Soviet military. Manchuria was relatively industrialized and had Japanese war equipment. In the south, forces would abandon their positions and concentrate. The Nationalists captured over 120,000 square miles by the end of the first year, but they were stretched thin and their strength was declining. They spread out to defend as much of China as possible, which left them vulnerable to communist encirclements. Their manpower had dropped from 4.4 million to 3.7 million. The Nationalists were largely financing the war through printing money, leading to severe inflation and instability. The Communists promised land to the farmers through the confiscation of property. The Communist ranks rose from 1.2 million to 2 million. With the Nationalists attacking Shandong in the east and Shanxi in the west, the CCP ordered Liu Bicheng and Deng Xiaoping to attack the Central Plains. Chiang Kai-shek repositioned his forces to meet the attack, but this weakened the Nationalists elsewhere and they started to lose momentum. The Communists were mobilizing peasants across central China, while the Nationalists concentrated in urban areas and along vital infrastructure, like railways and the Grand Canal. In September 1948, the Communists launched an attack to force the Nationalists out of Manchuria. As this campaign drew to a close, in November 1948, two new offensives were launched. One would target the old capital of Beijing, the other, Huaihai, would capture central China. The Communists had a superior army, even though they had inferior equipment. Key to this was the reason to fight. Whereas the Communists had promised peasants with land redistribution, the loyalty of the Nationalist soldiers relied on an oath to defeat the Communists. This came under considerable strain when the Communists were treated better. They had better food, clothing and medical equipment. This wasn't because the Nationalists didn't care about their soldiers, there just wasn't much to go around. Unsurprisingly, many Nationalist soldiers defected. The Communist High Command was also superior in loyalty and organisation. Local commanders were trusted with taking the initiative. The Nationalist command was plagued with factionalism, and therefore Chiang Kai-shek centralized control to keep everything together. However, this meant local commanders had little flexibility to adapt to unexpected situations. The Nationalists were also infiltrated by communist spies, even in positions of high command. The superior equipment of the Nationalists was not that effective either. Unlike Western Europe, roads in China were mostly poor and unpaved apart from between major urban areas. Moving troops by trucks and trains was quicker, but it wasn't flexible. Relying on rail and road channels for supply also meant that they were vulnerable to attack. Instead of gasoline, the Communists relied on muscle power. Almost 5.5 million civilian labourers and over 750,000 animals supported their soldiers. This actually made them more manoeuvrable, as they could go anywhere. General Suyu was the highest commander for the Communist side in the campaign. His plan was to infiltrate and encircle the Nationalist positions with the Communist superior mobility and destroy them in pockets. The first target was the 7th Army. The Communists feigned an attack on the major city of Suzhou to divert the Nationalist attention towards its defence and prevent them from reinforcing the 7th Army. Two deputy commanders of the 3rd Pacification Force, He Jifeng and Jiang Kexia, were secretly loyal to the Communists, and with their aid, 80% of the force defected, creating a huge gap in the Nationalist defence. Communist forces rushed to block the 7th Army's retreat to Suzhou, while guerrillas harassed the crossing at the Grand Canal. At Nianjiangshu, the 7th Army was encircled. Now there was a race between the Nationalists to relieve the 7th Army and the Communists destroying the pocket. The encirclement had concentrated the Nationalist forces in a fortified defence, making them difficult to eliminate. On the 19th of November 1948, the 7th Army would surrender, and many of the prisoners defected to the Communist side. Meanwhile, the Communists had captured Suxian and cut the Shubeng Railroad. Their advances were stalled in this area and some retreated east, drawing the 12th, 6th and 8th Armies to attack Suxian. Before these armies could group, the Communists attacked the rear of the Nationalist column and caused chaos. During this delay, defences were built to block the advance of the 12th Army. The 12th Army was now encircled. General Huang Wei decided to break through before the communist positions could be strengthened further. The commander of the 110th Division within the 12th Army, Liao Yunzhou, devised a plan to attack with 4 divisions in the column with him in the lead. Liao Yunzhou had secretly been a communist since 1927. He was waiting in the nationalist army for the best time to strike. Before the attack, he had warned the communists and convinced his division to defect. They had slipped away in the dark, leaving the other 3 divisions in a doomed attack. As this happened, the communists compressed the pocket. The nationalists decided to abandon Suzhou and retreat to the southwest. Then they would turn east to relieve the 12th Army. This force was under the command of Du Yuming. The majority of the communist forces were sent to slow Du Yuming down and encircle him before he could slip away. Before he could reach Yongcheng, an order was airdropped in. Chiang Kai-shek believed that the communists in the area had retreated and redirected him to relieve Huang Wei immediately. Du Yuming suspected that this order was influenced by Guo Rugui, the chief of operations in the defense ministry, who he thought was a communist infiltrator. His suspicion was correct, and his men were going into a death trap. Du Yuming wanted to refuse this direct order, but he would shoulder the blame if the 12th Army was destroyed. He and his commanders also felt obliged to be loyal to Chiang. The communists would direct defences to block Du Yuming's path forward and move around his position. Both the 12th Army and Du Yuming's forces were now encircled. While Du Yuming was moving to relieve the 12th Army, the 6th Army was moving north from Bengbu. With the communists focusing on encircling Du Yuming, only a delaying force opposed the 6th Army. Another race was on, between the communists trying to destroy the 12th Army and the 6th Army trying to break through. The 12th Army was well dug in and inflicted heavy casualties on the attacking communists. The communists had relatively little experience attacking well-fortified positions. Commanders were willing to throw men at the problem, until the defenders caved in. This changed when the 27th Division realised the merit of digging approach trenches to close the distance before an assault. I'm astonished I didn't think of this before. This new tactic worked incredibly well, and the pocket was crushed before a breakout attempt could be organised. There had been a lull in fighting while the communists used propaganda to convince soldiers to defect. Another reason for the pause in hostilities were events in the north. The communists were moving forces to block the nationalist retreat to the sea from the Beijing-Tianjin area. To delay this, they seized defences so that the nationalists would not be alarmed and retreat. Du Yuming implored Chiang Kai-shek to reinforce their position or to find a diplomatic solution, as a breakout would be impossible. On the 1st of January 1949, Chiang called for negotiations to end the war. By the 3rd of January this path was abandoned and Du Yuming was ordered to break out. Before a breakout could be organised, the communists attacked on the 6th of January and Du Yuming's force was wiped out. A week later, the forces around Beijing and Tianjin would also surrender. At Huaihai, 5 armies had been destroyed and 550,000 nationalist troops were killed or captured. The nationalist military had been decisively weakened, and the communists advanced quickly into southern China facing ineffective resistance. By the 23rd of April, the nationalist capital at Nanjing was captured, and on the 7th of December 1949, the nationalist government retreated to Taiwan, where they remain today.